I'll, I, what I'll do is I'll let everybody sort of introduce themselves. Obviously, I announced them as they came up, but I'd like everybody to sort of cover a little bit about your background and your perspectives on the topic.
Sure.
Please.
Yeah, I can get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Supreet, and thank you for hanging around for the last event. Hopefully, we'll make it quick and interesting. I am the Assistant Vice President for Data Strategy and Products in Morgan Stanley. Basically, I'm the product owner of various AI-driven products. My background has been in data science consulting before I joined Morgan Stanley, and I also have a master's and an MBA, dual degree in data science.
Great, thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cheryl Chiotti, and I look after the solution marketing team at Abby. So really responsible for articulating Abby's value proposition as it speaks uniquely into the industries that will benefit most from our process mining and intelligent document processing platforms.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jatindeep Singh. I work as an applied scientist. I've been working in the financial industry for the past 3 years. I've covered multiple use cases on underwriting, NLP, and some on reinforcement learning. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all at the stage. Thanks for everybody that's staying here. So the first question is, where have you found AI-based technology to provide the most benefit to an organization? And I will let whoever wants to speak first. I'm not going to imply who needs to go or who has a base opinion on it.
I can get started.
Sure.
So I think the goal of any organization is to provide customer-centric solution and to serve its customers. And that is where I find AI the most helpful. In the world of personalization, where everyone wants personalized solutions, we should also provide them personalized investment solutions, example. And that is where I think finance industry, AI in finance industry plays a pivotal role.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. You know, we talk about personalization across so many different things, and I would agree that we want that in our retail banking as well as in investment. But you know, there are so many different places where I think AI is helping financial institutions across AI-powered chatbots and financial assistance and different automated credit decisionings, for instance. You know, there's lots of opportunity to save money and reduce costs. You know, one place I've been doing a lot of writing about is around onboarding, and Abby conducted a survey recently about specifically targeting onboarding and some of the challenges that financial institutions have in their onboarding processes. And I read some research that says banks could lose up to $22 billion in revenue to slow onboarding costs, right? So the opportunity to leverage artificial intelligence and use that in some of those onboarding tasks. Plus, just speaking from a competitive perspective, there are fintechs and challenger banks who are going to approach these low-hanging fruit kind of problems and start to eat our lunch if we're not careful about that. So, I think there's a lot of opportunity to accelerate processes with structured data and semi-structured data and unstructured data in ways that artificial intelligence can really help with touchless onboarding, credit decisioning, anti-fraud solutions, compliance solutions. Like, the list really goes on and on for the opportunities for us to take advantage of artificial intelligence in some of these areas.
Sure, totally agree with both of them. I would just like to quote Michael Littman on how he perceives AI. So he gives out a quote on an example with a fish that if you feed a man a fish, he'll not be hungry for the day. If you teach the man how to fish, he won't be hungry for his whole life. Lastly, he says that if you give a man the taste of fish, he would kind of find out ways to get the fish, even if the details change. So what he kind of hints towards is, in his first quote, he talks about the good old-fashioned programming, where you program different bots, and you need to keep programming them as the environment changes. I guess in the second part, it kind of talks about supervised learning, where you kind of give out examples to your bot, and your bot writes your own code. In the last part, I think he talks about reinforcement learning and how you could just encode the reward system and your bot could strategize on its own. Specifically for the financial industry, we already saw many use cases. I feel we are somewhere between 2 and 3, where we're trying to automate a lot of processes with data using supervised learning or unsupervised learning. Along with that, automating them with reinforcement learning so that you don't have to go back to the training loop again and again.
So you all touched on this a little bit in your previous answers to the last question, but we always typically see financial services firms sort of leading in the technology space, right, in terms of other industries and stuff like that. And so maybe a follow-up question would be, from your opinions, why do you see financial services as an industry to take the most advantage of AI and as part of this journey? We've heard some speakers over the last couple of days say we're kind of at the infancy and we're kind of competing against historical models that are in place and some, a little bit of conflict there. And then how do we get a sense of what's happening in the black box of AI and ML? And we've had some folks talk a little bit about how to expose that to get people confidence. But, from your perspective, what do you folks think?
Yeah, I think some of the use cases were covered in the first question as well, like fraud analytics. Finance being highly regulated industry and most prone to fraud, AI can come at its rescue, where we can develop fraud models and tackle this issue. And that is all because the core of any AI model is its data, and we have rich customer-centric data. With the advent of cloud technologies, companies are leveraging real-time processing data, which can be further leveraged to build all these AI and ML models. And that is why I think finance industry is at an advantage.
Thank you. I suspect.
So I would totally agree with Supreet over here. Would just like to add on that given the fact the financial industry is so regulated, they've created very systematic data pipelines. Given the fact that they have such good data pipelines, they are right now sitting at a reservoir of pretty clean data. So I think that's one of the reasons why it makes financial industry one of the premium industry to try machine learning models. Along with that, we do see explainability AI building forces going into more deeper into how you could explain different kind of algorithms that were just written off as black boxes before.
Yeah, I think you hit a great point.
You covered it a little bit in your last one,
Yeah.
so I'm sorry to...
No, but I think you hit a great point with, improving confidence. That what we've been talking about over the past couple of days here in this conference is that maturity of artificial intelligence models and really gaining that confidence, so it's no longer just a black box where I can't understand what the results are going to be. And I think, financial services touches all of our lives in such a personal way. That's my money. This is very personal to me. So I'll be watching to see, well, how are these credit decisions being made? And if I go to your competitor and I am approved much more quickly, maybe as a consumer, I won't understand that that's AI behind the scenes, but I'll start to see the results of that, right? So that black box will be lessened a little bit. And from a financial institution's perspective, we'll see lower operational costs. We'll see, regulatory compliance. We'll see greater efficiencies gained. So I think we will start to see this maturity come, and I think not the too distant future.
That's great, thanks. So I'm going to change gears a little bit because I feel like I've been asking the same type of questions 3 different ways so far. And I'm making you kind of swim upstream to try and answer the question differently. But what advice would you give on how to strike the best balance of automation and human responsibilities going forward?
Lead or someone else wants to?
I can kick off. I mean, I think
Go for it.
I think that's a really important thing. In any of the processes that we start to automate, need that human touch to create them in the first place, to ensure that we're not just automating bad processes and we're not kicking things off that that haven't had that human touch first. And I think that that's part of of what we can do to achieve greater efficiency and, reduce some of that uneasiness around artificial intelligence. We've heard for a long time, well, are the robots going to take my job, and those types of fears. But I think what we'll see is that we'll always need human in the loop. We'll always need humans to kind of retrain models, to go in. I loved the Bloomberg presentation earlier today, where he was quite honestly saying, I don't see a day where we'll completely have unsupervised AI. We need the human in the loop and that type of human touch, I think, to ensure that the processes are staying within. But we'll be able to take some of those more repetitive tasks, those things that we can, in a trusted way, leave unsupervised. And I think we'll see more and more of that, But there's plenty for the data science team to do, and I think there always will be.
I would totally agree with you. What I do feel is there's always a degree of control between the data science team and the automation team. Some of the, as you kind of build a model and try to put that in production, one of the tasks that you have to do is develop a monitoring structure, understand what the model is supposed to do, give amount of backtesting results, but also have some amount of window towards how the model is going to perform in production. And what happens, or specifically what happens if the model does not perform the way it should be performing? What kind of tasks are you going to take in hand after that?
Yeah, I think they mostly covered everything, but I would just like to add one thing. As we talk about explainable AI, there is also a lot of conversation on responsible or ethical AI. And the core of it is the fairness and bias testing that needs to be done. We do see in the news some of the articles that come up where, XYZ female was not selected for maybe a credit card, but she had the same income as the male counterpart and all of those things. So that is where I think the data scientists need to go in, study the input data, and see that there's no bias there, because bias is not in the model, bias is in the data, and it needs to be detected at the data level so that you have a fair model. So I think that is also very important, and that's where human touch is required.
Yeah, and just to touch on Cheryl's point about Bloomberg, one of the questions I had for him, if I had an opportunity, was sort of the up and down thumbs.
Right.
And he basically told us what it did, right? It sends an email to say, hey, go back and take a look at it. So I thought that was sort of an interesting, intersection.
Human response.
Right, exactly. So I'm glad you brought up the Bloomberg one as well. So what skill sets and roles, we talked a little bit about the last couple of days about data scientists, data engineers, data labelers, right? But from your perspective, right, what maybe new roles or the expansion of those roles? I forget who it was, but one of the presenters had discussed it. Everybody says data scientist, but sometimes they mean data engineer. So from your all's perspective, what other skills do you think people should be focusing on? What roles do you think are creating in this space?
I think based on what you just said about ethics and ensuring that bias isn't in there, we need to really think about, diversity and inclusion in those teams, and really making sure, because I think that's such an important part that, we could be baking certain biases into these models and not even know, So I think some of the roles around ethics, around inclusion and diversity, I think are some of the roles that maybe we haven't thought of because we've been so focused on the technical side of building the models, right? That maybe we haven't completely absorbed those other aspects into the teams. But if we have these cross-functional teams that make sure that we're keeping these things in check from the beginning, I think that there'll be less opportunity for those biases to be baked into the models, from the beginning. So that's certainly one part of the team that I think hasn't always been considered, that I think in the future will be part of these teams.
That totally makes sense to me. According to me, the kind of trends I'm seeing, there's a flow towards explainable AI. I feel AI is growing and it's maturing, so different teams have started to look for niches in different areas of AI specifically. Maybe it could be time series modeling, it could be specific niches in NLP, or a niche in reinforcement learning. So rather than looking for a ML generalist, people are maybe looking for a specialist.
Yeah, and just kind of summing up what both of them said, to achieve both of that, you actually need the power of storytelling. And in my consulting career, that is what I've learned, that when you're talking to your clients, when you're talking to your senior leadership, they might not be as comfortable with the algorithms as you. So even to pursue explainable AI, you need to explain the model in simplistic terms, and that is where the power of storytelling kicks in. So I think that is one skill that we need, and the other is MLOps, because I actually read a study where it said that 80% of the models still don't make it to production. So we do need that knowledge of building machine learning pipelines, and we do need knowledge of those systems so that we can actually create impactful machine learning models. And MLOps is actually a niche area now, but I feel that even the universities and all the institutions have to consider this as a separate coursework, maybe to equip the data scientists.
Okay. And so lastly, if, as the name of the session sort of implied, this institution of the future, right? We've discussed different subsets of what it looks like and where we think the market's going and how it relates to financial services. But it'd be great to hear everybody's perspective of what this overarching institution of the future looks like as well.
Yeah, I think I can start. I think gone are the days when data scientists were sitting in Solis and just coding. Now it is a much more collaborative environment. And to achieve all of this fairness bias testing or the explainable AI, you need to talk to different stakeholders to understand the data, to understand so what, basically the impact of what you are doing. So I do envision a future where everyone is collaborating, and especially in finance, where it's such a regulatory industry, where you have to speak to the model review committees and you have to get hundreds of approvals. There could be a time where all of those stakeholders will also understand data science models, because data scientists will be successful in explaining all of them, of the work that they have done. So I do envision an extremely collaborative environment.
I would totally agree with Supreet over here. Just to sum up what she says, I feel that institutions of the future would be highly data-driven. I feel like given a process, it would be shared by multiple stakeholders, and the stakeholders would be guided by AI, or the whole process would be guided by AI, each of the processes, or the AI would be the process as a whole.
Yeah, and I think what you said about storytelling really feeds into this, because the way that we can have that level of explainability across different functional teams within a financial institution is going to be from obtaining a great sense of storytelling and being able to do that. I think we've come from a place where, you know, the black box that you talked about earlier, right? Like, I don't understand this, so I'll just leave that to the data scientists, and I'm not even going to try. But being able to bridge that gap between kind of business stakeholders and the technical side and the data analytics team, the data science team, and I think you'll get there through great storytelling, you know, so I think that's definitely part of it. But the way I see the future really being built is through an ecosystem, right? We have to have this kind of ecosystem of technologies. I think we've seen kind of different silos of data across financial institutions really get us into a lot of trouble in so many different ways, between, you know, operational expenses and regulatory compliance and customer experience, the inability to offer personalized services. To bring it back to your first response, actually, because those silos have historically been built up. But now I think what I anticipate for the institution of the future is really more of an ecosystem and a blending and breaking down some of those siloed walls that we've seen historically.
Yeah, and if you think, we've heard a number of presenters talk about the amount of time it takes to prepare data, get models ready, then you start getting into drift, and what does it take to sort of pull it off? You know, I think some people were a little bit surprised to hear year to years to get this information ready, and then you find out that there's an error or a mistake, and then having to go back. Well, I'd like to save a little bit of time for people to ask questions. Right, we have an opportunity to ask anybody questions on the stage that may have one. Do we have any questions from the audience? Come on now, I know it's late on a Friday.
It's a beautiful day out
you
there.
have, right, exactly. We're sandwiched between a beautiful Friday afternoon in New York City, which we haven't seen in a while. But not one question. Eventually, I was going to guilt somebody into
Yeah,
it.
hey, guys.
Everybody has one. They're just holding back. They're not-
Amazing panel. I'm curious about your thoughts on training data and where the industry is evolving, right? How do you continue to retrain models, not using synthetic data? So just curious about what you guys have seen and what are some of the strategies you guys are taking in your organizations to train models?
Sure, I can start with that. I don't think I need synthetic data. My hands are pretty full with data. The only thing I'm trying to do over here is sample it out so that I could run a decent model on Python or PySpark. So that would be my short and sweet answer for training data.
Okay, I can continue. Yeah, I think what Jatindeep said, it's spot on. But my thoughts on training data becomes a challenge when you're having a cold start problem. So that's definitely a challenge, and that is when we rely on proxy data or synthetic data. But I don't think if we are capturing the data correctly and if we are building efficient data pipelines, finance, industry, or some of the banks should be short of customer data. We should definitely have a lot of it. We just need to come up with innovative use cases now to leverage that.
Well, I have a question. It's not on the list. So this came up a lot. It happens to be a little bit near and dear to my heart as well. And you all have discussed it. It came up during the last couple of days around the volume of data and how do you. And I think what came up today in terms of the bias of it. How do we? Does anybody have a perspective then on how do you obfuscate the data in such a way so that you're not sharing sensitive data and yet still getting value out of the data you're trying to model from a production. I had to stop drinking coffee. Totally stopped. And still get value out of it in a production sense.
So I think there are like multiple sandboxes that are available in the financial industries. Those would mask a lot of PI information and kind of just mask it to a unique key, credible key that you could use. These are some of the use cases I've seen.
So it's basically masking the PII
Yes.
piece of it, but the balances and trends and stuff like that.
Yes.
Be able to
So
push to the
you
model.
know what you're working on. You just don't know who or where the particular person resides.
I think there's lots of opportunity to gain value from data without ever having to touch the PII. I think an earlier speaker said treat the PII like toxic waste and stay away from it, right? And I think we can still glean all kinds of, and maybe even, stay away from some of the biases that we were talking about too, so, but I think it's our responsibility, right? So we have to figure this out and we have to do a great job at it.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of processes in place where PII data is not given to everyone. You have to go through certain loops, and that is all to avoid such a situation where PII data is being accessed by people who don't need to access it. So yeah, and I think without that as well, there are a lot of ample other features that are available that can be used to build models. So, we can keep it as it is and continue our lives with the other features.
I think this would also depend on the model itself. Like, what does the compliance of fair lending think about the kind of variables you're using? It should be mostly like an open conversation between you and these folks. Hey, I'm using these particular variables. Do you think these particular variables are reconfiguring any of the PII information that we have on people?
This is where the collaborative nature of work will kick in. So.
Because I think for a long time we talked about having a 360-degree view of our customer, right? But we don't all need that, So I think it's important to talk about, to Supreet's point, limiting that to those that need it. We don't all need to know everything about all the customers. So ensuring that we keep those we keep those things kind of,
Yeah. And there are SMEs available, right? Like based on your use cases. There are SMEs in your company. You can talk to them, get a 360 view. So, yeah, that can be done as well. So.
Well, great, thank you. Does anybody have any other questions? All right. Well, I'll thank our panelists.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
And that kind of wraps us up for the day. See a couple other post-event points here, right? Obviously, thank the speakers again one last time. Thank you. Thank the audience, at least, especially those that stayed till the end, right? April and team in the back of the room, right, from the event team. Thank you all. As a reminder, right, in 2 weeks or so, right, you'll all get an email with information around access to the content and for the presenters that have shared their PowerPoints, because not everybody's available to sort of share the content that they displayed on the screens today. You get access to that as well. And hope to see everybody at the next Rework event. Thank you.